We've been asked, why have we introduced this cover? Our view is that because of Fair Work Australia, the employment environment is becoming more complex and certainly more litigious. The employees are certainly more aware of their rights than traditionally they have been. As we can see by John's explanation, that it is expensive to defend these matters. These matters are not ones to be given to the local legal practitioner. These are a specific area of law which need expert advice to resolve them, hopefully quickly and inexpensively. It is about the protection of your practice. Your practice invariably is a small business which doesn't need to be distracted by an ongoing employment practices related matter, and it also obviously needs protection from the financial side. Again, with John's company managing the claim on behalf of the practice, they are getting expert advice from day one, how to manage, what to do, when to do it. An untold cost in relation to all liability type claims is the cost of the time and effort and energies of the practice managing and trying to settle these matters. And our advice always to the practices is that insurance is at the end of your risk management model. The risk management must be the first, second and third points of managing your risk. And I'd certainly refer you to CPA's Reference Employment Manual for an excellent guideline in relation to employee-related matters.
I agree with you, Drew, and the things that need to be stressed here are that firstly, it is a specialist area. Employment claims require technical resources to be able to be managed effectively. So the good thing about this policy is that if you have a claim, we will provide those specialist resources so you can get the right advice. The sooner we get notified, the sooner we can provide that specialist advice. It is a very complicated area. Laws change quickly and across a vast spectrum of regulation and legislation. The people that we get to manage these claims are employment law specialists. They're not insurance specialists, they're specialists in employment law. Unfortunately, they're very expensive. The average insurance lawyer would be $400 per hour approximately, whereas the employment lawyers are $650 per hour and above. However, it's an investment based around getting the right advice quickly so that you can try and avoid the costs of an extensive dispute. Because the big issue with this is time. If you have a claim, let's look at David Jones, and that claim is not handled as effectively as it could be, the costs in terms of human resources, brand reputation and legal costs can be astronomical. We've had some examples recently where parties in dispute over either termination or, in one case, privacy issues and confidential information issue, where there was only one or two exchanges of letters between the parties, between their lawyers, the legal bill was more than $10,000. Imagine what that can add up to when you've got a full-blown dispute. I remember one case probably 5 years ago where the legal costs of trying to bring parties together to discuss a resolution were something like $65,000. The end resolution was, in financial terms, $5,000 plus the person got to have a library named after them, which was really the nub of the dispute. They wanted some recognition. And if that could have been done at the very outset, the parties got together, you could have avoided that extensive legal bill. So what we're imploring members to do is, when they get this cover, if they do get an employment-related claim, to advise us quickly, because we can actually potentially involve specialist resources who can advise on this complicated area of law as to what are the options early, and they can include a swift, cost-effective resolution. They can include understanding the kinds of notice periods that need to be paid if someone's being terminated, and also just making sure that what you've done, hopefully legally, will pass muster.
That's given us a really good overview. Could we just finish off, and I'll just put two scenarios to you. One of them, in the cover, there is an ability for somebody who is not an employee to bring an action, which may seem strange to many of CPA members. But I wonder, could you just take us through a case where, for example, I go for a job at your firm, I'm well qualified, I present well, and I do not get the job. 6 months later, you get a writ on your doorstep saying you have discriminated against me because of A, B, C. Could you tell me how that would pan out in relation to the claim being handled?
Well, there's probably two things to consider when you're looking at an example like that. The first is, and this is why this cover is so important, is that you as an employer haven't necessarily done anything wrong to have a claim brought against you. You don't have to have actually committed any act of discrimination for someone to allege that you have discriminated against them. And this policy obviously is triggered by the allegation that there was discrimination. So it is quite feasible for a potential employee who is aggrieved in the interview process to bring an action against you saying that they were the best qualified person for the job and ought to have been employed. The way it is managed from there is to make sure that you bring on the specialist resources that we have at our disposal to advise and take you through the process. But critical to most of these things is the right documentation trail. We've seen many cases where basically if you don't have the right documentation, you don't have the right process in place, that it's very difficult to defend. So we implore all practitioners obviously to have the right processes and the right procedures and written procedures, so that if there is ever any claims for discrimination, harassment, or a failure to employ or a failure to promote, that you can point to those procedures as a defence to any allegations against you. If you don't have those procedures, it's easy for someone to make an accusation which, unfortunately, may just stick.
And the other scenario I'd like to put to you is one where I've been a long-term employee, presumably doing my job okay, and a higher position comes along for which I do not get the job, but a younger person does, and I believe I've been discriminated against. I'm currently an employee, I continue to be an employee, but I feel that I haven't received that next position with the extra $10,000 a year.
And that's probably a classic case of where this employment practices cover is such a good thing to have, because really if you haven't managed the expectations of your employees effectively, there is the potential that one out there may think that they deserve to get a job that they may not have really been in the position to get. And that's where obviously not a lot of smaller companies have human resource managers. So it's incumbent upon the partners and the senior people in the organisation to have some good documentation around the process of promoting or failing to promote an individual. If they've gone through a good process, then it will be defensible. If they haven't got the documentation around the process, then there may be some difficulties. The thing to remember is, though, that someone can bring this action irrespective of whether there's a foundation to the action or not. And if you don't have the written procedures in place, you're more likely to have an exposure to lengthy litigation, costs and time, because it'll be more difficult to defend.
John, thanks for your time today. Now, in conclusion, we can see that employment practices liability is a significant risk exposure to all employers. The environment has changed with Fair Work Australia, and we can see how important it is to have a effective risk management program and well documented employee files in relation to running your practice. Hopefully this insurance, this extension of cover under the professional indemnity policies doesn't need to be used, but if in the case it does, it will be there for the benefit of not only protection of money, but also advice into helping practitioners run their businesses.